So the Alter Rebbe says that when it comes to the Beinoni, that he says, I don't want to, actually if you start to see the first words of this, which we mentioned before, right, as for me, I have no desire to be such a fool as he. In other words, one who translates the mitzvahs and the avedas not in its renouncing or in the context of renouncing or announcing the oneness of Hashem, proclaiming the oneness of Hashem or renouncing the oneness of Hashem. Because in the end of the day, every Aveda is pulling oneself from the oneness of Hashem, dividing, making a division between himself and Hashem. Avein Yiseicha Mavdilim, as Alter Rebbe quoted. The sins separate the Yid from Hashem. Every sin, not only when one overtly renounces the oneness of Hashem. When he says, when he, we're going to have the first two of Aseret Sedibris, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and thou shalt not, Lo yeh lecha likim lachenim. And as again the Medrash says that every Aved is ultimately associated with pulling oneself away from the Eibishter. The Pesheya, in other words, the one who's Kal Shebekalim, as Alter Rebbe described it, he's lenient among lenient. He has an neshama, and he's ready to give up his life for Hashem. When he would ever be tested by that test of Mesiras Nefesh, in other words, if he ever be tested, he would go rather, let's put it this way, put it in the right wording, he would have Miskoah Mesiras Nefesh, sacrifice himself, not to renounce the oneness of Hashem, if he's ever tested with that test to proclaim or renounce the oneness of Hashem. But in the same time, or in the same token, this person is described as a Kal Shebekalim, which means he's lenient among lenience in his actual daily observance or his ongoing observance in his Avodas Hashem. He is lenient among lenience, means to say he's not adequately observant. He doesn't do the mitzvahs the way he's supposed to do them, and he's not careful from the avedas which one is prohibited to do. And the Beinoni, again, he has complete control, and he stays completely composed in his framework of mind, and ultimately able to materialize that message of that structured framework of mind, not to be a shaita, a fool, like the individual who believes he could be a Kal Shebekalim, lenient among lenient, despite he himself would give his life over to Hashem had he been tested had he been tested with his test of to renounce the oneness of Hashem, but yet he could be a Kal Shebekalim. He doesn't find the contradiction. The Beinoni says, no, I don't want to be a fool like him. The Beinoni understands that every single Aveda one pulls himself away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, separates himself from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, may it be mitzvah saseh or mitzvah leiseseh. And the Beinoni is 100% online with Torah mitzvahs. And the Alter Rebbe began the Peirik Yudalit. He says, despite that he's still a Beinoni, he's not a tzaddik, his heart, his nefesh bahamis, is still intact 100%. Hence, it continues in an ongoing and a constant basis to send in these negative messages and signals from his heart to his mind. Think chas v'sholom neged ratzon, against, contrary rather to the Hashem's desire. Speak contrary to the Hashem's desire, or do contrary to Hashem's desire. And these are the ongoing signals which the heart is sending. Means to say the Beinoni did not tackle his heart. He doesn't have the ability, or he's one which his heart, his nefesh bahamis, has come so intact that despite he never transgressed, he's one who never transgresses, never violates not one mitzvah ever, because again, if you violate one mitzvah, as we learn time and again, he's a rasha, may it be in action, may it be in speech, may it be in a thought. So he's completely, he does everything what he's supposed to do, even limidat Torah, which is again technically the hardest mitzvah to fulfill. Every moment he has, every moment which is conducive to learning Torah, he's actually learning Torah. And again, he's scrupulous in kima mitzvah say and mitzvah leiseseh, yet he still has an nefesh bahamis, which is constantly sending the signals, and these signals which are not only not aligned with Ratzon Hashem, contrary to Ratzon Hashem, but he is completely in control and understands that had I allow one signal to enter my action or my speech or my thought, I'm going to be called a rasha, and I will be separated from Hashem, and I know that I have the ability to do everything to be aligned, to be in line with Ratzon Hashem. Similar to the Kal Shebekalim. The Kal Shebekalim would literally give up his life. It's not that he's completely unaware of the reality of godliness. He's so aware that had he been tested to renounce the oneness of Hashem, he would give up his life, literally be ready to expire. But why is he a Kal Shebekalim? Because he never makes the connection between every mitzvah say to Anech Hashem Alekecha, to understand that if he transgresses, he violates a mitzvah say, he separates himself from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If he violates a mitzvah, he separates himself from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that's the Kal Shebekalim. as Belton begins this page, the Beinin say, I'm not going to deny the truth, and I know that every Aveira, every mitzvah says, every Aveira is practically, every mitzvah is announcing, proclaiming, implementing, or Chas v'Shalom renouncing the oneness of Hashem. However, something which is associated with heart, that's not the Beinoni. That the heart, that the evil should be disgusted in the heart, abhorrent in the heart, with the ultimate hatred, or with not the maximum and ultimate hatred, which is, again, if you remember, you see over here the difference of the tzaddik v'tev, tzaddik v'rale. As you know, there's tens of thousands of different levels, but Alter Rebbe alludes to it over here, the ultimate hatred, which is the tzaddik. The tzaddik is not only does what Hashem wants, he transformed his heart. He only has a lev echad, love Hashem, he has one heart to Hashem. Means to say he's in love with Hashem. When you're in love with Hashem, you consequently, you have an abhorrence to something which is antithetical to godliness, which that's the tzaddik she'eni gamor, that he also has a certain level of abhorrence to things which are opposite than Hashem's desire, but not the tachlis, not with the ultimate hatred. But that's all in the life of the tzaddik, which did not only make a dent, transform their heart. They have a heart. In other words, they not only are in line with Ratzon Hashem, but their heart is in a state of connection and love and dveikus with Hashem. But that's not the Beinoni. The Beinoni has nothing of that. So when someone wants to think of it, can he be a Beinoni? Can I be a Beinoni if my Nefesh Bahamas is completely intact? The answer is, not can you be, that is a Beinoni. That your animal soul, in other words, the heart drive to things which are contrary to Ratzon Hashem is 100% intact, and then nonetheless you're never a rasha for a moment. And then that's what he says, to have betachas hasina, betachas hasina. No, that's not the Beinoni. That cannot be with ultimate truth. That only comes when a person has an intense love to Hashem. With a state of complete, with a state of pleasure, literally means pleasurable love, lisanig al Hashem, to derive pleasure of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the only way that a person could, that's the only way that a person could have, could be in that state of tachlis hasina, which means he could have the ultimate hatred to things which are antithetical to God and godliness, or even without the ultimate abhorrence. But that's only when he's in a state that his heart is completely transformed to Hashem in a way that he is in love with Hashem. His whole pleasure is love to Hashem. In other words, his love, as we met, the Alter Rebbe is alluding to in the end of Perek Yud, Alter Rebbe said there's different levels of love. We elaborated at the time. We're not going to go into it now. But the ultimate, the climactic level of love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's when it's associated with ta'anugim, which is love associated with pleasure. In other words, it's a pleasurely love which he has in Lisanig al Hashem, which means he derives delight. He's delighting in godliness. That's literally means Lisanig. His whole delight, his whole pleasure is associated with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the life of the tzaddik. It's not the life of the Beinoni. He has other tanugim. In other words, the heart could send other signals of other pleasures which again not only are not aligned with what Hashem wants, but quite on the contrary, align with what Hashem does not want. And so then he's not, in other words, if you say that his love, the Nefesh Bahamis is so intact that it sends the signals with other drives and other avos, other delights, other than Ratzon Hashem. So obviously he's not hating something which is not Ratzon Hashem. Quite on the contrary, he's driven to that. But he's never a rasha because he will never implement that in action, thought, speech, and action. Because again, as you remember in the previous chapters, Dr. Rebbe explained, it goes together. When you love something or somebody Consequently, anything which is not aligned with that person's principle or that idea, you're not only not driven to it, but you hate it. It's famous word, I think in Chavis Avavas he says, or another, I forget one of this Sifri Musa, he says, the two Avos we mentioned in the past as well, the two Avos cannot dwell in the same heart. You can't love godliness and love Olam Hazeh in the same time. Now, we say Olam Hazeh, it's not, Esrig is also part of Olam Hazeh, and Tefillin is also part of Olam Hazeh. In other words, something which is just the material, the physical, or the indulgence in pleasure, in physical pleasures without any godly purpose, that drive can never coincide with the drive to God and godliness. It can't, by definition, because this is one thing, and this is the opposite, the mere antithesis of that. So a tzaddik which has a great love to Hashem, and not only great love to Hashem, now to Rebbe introduces or brings in over here the Ava B'Tanugim, the highest, the climax level of love, full of delight in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. His whole delight is in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Consequently, he's abhorrent of things which are not aligned with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, it depends what level tzaddik he is. And Masha Enkin, as opposed to the Beinani, quite on the contrary. He goes out of shul, and all of a sudden his heart is driven to things which he could find pleasures and things which are totally not aligned with Hashem. And quite on the contrary, it could be neged Ratzon Hashem. He's still the Beinani, not the Rasha, because, as we learned in the previous chapters, and again we culminate in the last class which we had over here, he says that when it comes to Machshav Dibur Maisis, about thought, speech, and action, he's 100% pure, 100% complete. So to have again this despise and anything which is contrary to Ratzon Hashem, that's the life of the tzaddik, and that's me'ein elam haba, similar to the world to come. What is the world to come? The person there's no desire, not in anything which is associated with any worldly pleasure and delight. That is the life of the tzaddik. This is what the Razal tells us, that it could be when Hashem promised Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak, I believe, Yitzchak and Yaakov, if I'm not mistaken, all the others, I think namely Avraham Avinu says, that you can see your world, which means Eilam Haba in your own life. That's the life of the tzaddik. But not everybody merits that kibbutz schar. It's a little bit like of a reward. In other words, what's in Ke'ain? Why is it Ke'ain? Because in the end of the day, it's part of the avoid of the person. It's part of the service of the person. The person is serving a Kadosh Baruch Hu with excitement, so it's more the avodah. So why is it classified kibbutz schar, as if you're receiving reward? The answer is because when you're excited about God, you're already a step higher than the rest, than the average person, that he's more fighting with himself, or constantly subduing his Yetzer Hara, or fighting with his Yetzer Hara that it should not enter thought and speech and action. And when a person elevates himself to a state that he's excited about God, that's pretty much of a reward. So the Alter Rebbe says Ke'ain, it's not mamash a reward, because in the end of the day it's your avodah, you're serving God with joy and delight and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, it's kibbutz schar. If you could be excited about God, that's a kind of a reward. You're floating. You're floating as opposed to struggling. You're floating on the cloud of Avodas Hashem as opposed to struggling and battling, in constant battle with the Beinani has. So that's like Ke'ein kibbutz schar. Ukidiksiv, like it says, Avodas Matonet is Kunaschem, the next page. Then when it comes to the Kohen, which is a similar idea, it says, Kohen Nevi says Avodas Matona. The fact that this one is a Kohen, and this one's a Levi, and this one's a Yisrael, is Hashem says it's a kind of present, it's a gift that gave the Kohen, right? You know, there's a famous joke of how did it go? The guy comes to shul and he's decided to be a kohen, and he says, giving all the money, he takes out his checkbook, Rabbi, I'm going to give the biggest check in the world, at least make me kohen. So then he said, I can't make you kohen. He told him a kohen is something which is or you're born with it or you're not. And he says, well, after struggling with him back and forth, he says, so why do you want to be a kohen? He says, my grandfather was a kohen, my father was a kohen, I want to be a kohen. A kohen is a kohen is a kohen is a kohen. You can't. It's a reality, and the whole avodah. So therefore, and they had certain priorities in the places where they could have gone. Like the kohen god, they could have gone to the kodesh kadosh. The kohenim, there was a place where the kohen entered and the Yisrael does not enter. There's kohenim, they did avodah and so on. Why are they so lucky? Answer: that's why it's classified as matana. It's a gift. It's not something in which you can gain. A Levi Yisrael will work as hard as he can in his Aveda, or do his Aveda, which is again pertinent to him. He'll never become a Kohen. So you see over here there's a concept that it's part of Aveda, it's a service, but on the other hand it's called Matana, it's a gift. So again, how does it go together? If it's Aveda, how's it Matana? If it's Matana, it's Aveda. The answer is that this is just Kunaschem. This is similar to the Aveda of the Kohen. It's Aveda, they serve, but on the other hand, they're exclusive. Their whole service is one matana. This is, now the Rebbe brings this. This is similar to the idea of the tzaddik, which is again, in one hand, this is a is not only similar, but this is kind of the idea, the avodah of the tzaddik is similar to avodah. Is the idea of avodah matana things can ask. On one hand, this is avodah, but on the other hand, the fact that he's excited about the Eibishter. So it's like a matana. It's a gift. It's a kind of kibbutz schar. It's part of his reward. That's what it says, me'ein elam haba. It's part of his avodah, but the fact that he has simcha in Hashem, so he's beyond the struggle. That's something that definitely can be classified as a gift. Who wouldn't want it? That Hashem should infuse this new reality that my avodas Hashem is something that I need not to struggle. I'm abhorrent of anything which is not aligned with Hashem, and I'm excited of anything which is aligned with Hashem. That's wonderful. That's why it's classified as a matana. That's why to a tzaddik it's a schar. Why does he deserve the schar? Probably he did certain things that he deserved the schar. And we'll see later that a person in the end of the day could maybe uplift himself to this. But b'chlalis, it's not something that we could, like the Levi Yisrael Levi cannot become the Kayin, so too we cannot strive to be the tzaddik. Primarily the tzaddik. The tzaddik is ki'ibul schar, it's a reward. If Hashem decides to make you a tzaddik, you're going to become a tzaddik. And then that's what be your reward. That's a matana, that's a gift. And therefore, just like a Kayin and Yisrael Levi cannot strive to be the Kayin, the Yisrael Levi cannot strive to be the Kayin, we cannot strive to be the tzaddik. It's explained elsewhere. And therefore, Alter Rebbe goes back to therefore, Eiv says, Baras Tzaddikim, famous question Alter Rebbe asks, that how could Eiv, this is the first page of Tanya, how could Eiv say God, you created the Tzaddikim? What is Alter Rebbe based? Alter Rebbe based on the Gemara. The Gemara says before a person is born, the Malachim handle the potential state of the person, and the Malachim, based on the heavenly dictate, say this person is going to be rich, or he's going to be poor. He's going to be foolish, he's going to be wise. Many important developments of the person's future is all predetermined. Like if someone's going to say, if it's predetermined, if I'm poor, how could I ever be rich? Right? It's just a famous question. If it says the Malach, which deals with this pre-state of the prenatal state of the person, says all about the future of the person, so how can I ever change that? Right? That's the famous argument. If he says I'm going to be poor, how can I ever be rich? Why am I striving to make a lot? The answer is you have no idea what the Malach said. Right? It could be that today the person's poor and tomorrow he's rich. You don't know. We have to do whatever we can, naturally, in the confines of nature and the legal system, in order to make it. And why not have a lot of be rich, as an example, and utilize the riches for avodas Hashem, to be able to give tzedakah and to live in a b'chava life and so on, and to do mitzvahs in a different manner based on the person's wealth. Like I say, a person could strive to make his life more enhanced, even with actual ashirus, but he cannot say that maybe he was predetermined. You have no idea what the Malach said. That's just, I'm saying this parenthetically. But one thing is clear, everything is predetermined. It says, the Gemara says one thing, the Malach has no say. Nobody has a say on this state, on this person, and has to say the future of the person. What? If he's going to be a tzaddik or he's going to be a rasha. Because everything is in God's hand except anything associated with heavenly fear, which is really, it's the package of Torah mitzvahs, which is associated with Yiras Shamayim. And nobody has a say on it. Nobody could predetermine what's going to be the future of this person. Is going to be a tzaddik and a rasha. And again, the Gemara says tzaddik v'rasha lo ka'amar. Nobody says it because it's completely devoted and given over to the freedom of choice of man. So the question is, Alter Rebbe asked in the first page of Tanya, how does Eiv say, God, you created tzaddikim? Hashem never created tzaddikim. Tzaddik v'rasha lo ka'amar. Hashem, it all depends. It's all given over to the hands of man. Answer: yes. To be a Beinani, Hashem doesn't say anything. Not to be a rasha, Hashem doesn't say anything because it's in our hands and this is within our choice. Every thought what comes to mind, if it's inappropriate, I'm going to push it away, and I'm doing it. No one tells me to do it. I mean, Hashem assists me, like we learned in the beginning of the 13th chapter. But nonetheless, it's my decision. And that's what the Gemara said, that to be a rasha, no one's going to tell me not to be a rasha or not to be a rasha. Even to be a tzaddik, we say to do things which are just in alignment with Torah mitzvahs. But to be a tzaddik, to be the level of tzaddik, that's not in my hands. That's a gift from above. It's like I said, Hashem says, this person's going to be a kain. Yes, that's a gift, and that's a predetermination from above. The person's born, and he has a mother a kain, father a kain. He's going to be a kain. And similar to the idea of a tzaddik, the whole notion of tzaddikim is in the package of kibbutz schar. It's part of the reward what Hashem bestows upon this person who he decides to be a tzaddik. Matan, it's a gift. That's why Eve could have said, Baras tzaddikim. Yes, you created tzaddikim. Because to be a tzaddik is really not in our hands at all. So again, when the Gemara says tzaddik v'rasha leika amar, that the malach cannot say what is the future and predetermine the person going to be a tzaddik v'rasha, that's the weight of the beinin, because no one could tell me if I should transgress or not transgress, if I be scrupulous with the mitzvahs I say, or be careful with mitzvahs loises. That's completely in my hands, and the malach never said it because hakol d'shemaim chutz mi'irah. But the step above the norm, to be the tzaddik, to be excited about God and to be abhorrent with things which are antithetical to godliness, that's a different type of state. That's a simchut tzaddikim b'Hashem. It's something which is associated with tzaddik. That's not in our Aveda. We don't do that. That is Hashem does that. That's why Eve easily said, yes, you created tzaddikim, borasa tzaddikim. And Gedisa b'tikunim, it's brought also in Tikunei Zohar, that there are neshamas coming in madregas of chinas. By Yidden, there are different degrees and different grades. It doesn't mean that because we're given the freedom of choice to be careful in Torah mitzvahs, we're all on the same level. And we'll all be doing the same Torah mitzvahs. It doesn't mean that because there's Torah achas l'kolanu, there is one Torah, and there all truly is one Torah. It doesn't mean we're all on the same level. It says in Zayah that there are different levels and different grades. There's Chasidim, there's Gebeirim HaMizgaberim Al Yitzram, and then there's Morei Torah, and there's Nevi'im, and Tzadikim Ayin Sham. And we'll stop over here because here is actually two dots. Even in Tanya, there's few chapters in Tanya which are divided into two chapters. In other words, in the first Likutei Amarim, there's very few chapters that are divided into two, and this is one of them. And for a reason we will see, when we learn next week, we'll see why it's divided, because Alter Rebbe introduces a new idea in the next part of the Perek Yud Dalet. It's very clear, that we can make much sense of why, so uncharacteristically, the Alter Rebbe divided this chapter in the original text of Tanya. But we will see, we will understand, we'll appreciate it when we'll learn next week. But let's understand what he's saying over here. That it says clearly, there's Chasidim, and there's Gebeirim HaMizgaberim Al Yitzram, which we'll see, namely where the Alter Rebbe is extracting his proof over here from this Tikunei Zohar. There are the mighty which strengthen themselves on the Yetzer Hara. And then there's people which are Morei Torah. They are scholars in Torah, and then Nevi'im, there are prophets, and then Tzaddikim. And then there is Tzaddikim. Ayin Sham, look there. So if you look at, namely again, the main proof that Alter Rebbe is bringing from here is, you see clear from this one line that tzaddikim are not Gebeirim HaMizgaberim Al Yitzram. Tzaddikim are not the ones who are strong or mighty. Naturally, it doesn't mean physical strength. It means to say those who are strengthened themselves over Yetzer Hara, because if not, it would be redundant. Like you want to say, a tzaddik, oh, he's such a tzaddik, he strengthened himself over Yetzer Hara. We see over here clearly there's two different grades in Yidden. One is Gebeirim HaMizgaberim Al Yitzram, the strong, the mighty, which are able to overcome the Yetzer Hara. But no, that's not a tzaddik, because he says later another grade which is tzaddik. So on the surface, when you think about someone's a tzaddik, oh, he's a tzaddik. Why is a tzaddik? Because every test he has, his Yetzer Hara is sending him so many signals, and he's able to overcome each one of them. Not only in action, but in speech, even thought, he stays pure and he stays clean, and even his thought, he's 100% aligned with Ratzon Hashem. He's a big tzaddik. We just said that's not the tzaddik. The tzaddik is a step above that. So the tzaddik is not the one who strengthens himself over the Yetzer Hara, that's the Beinoni. So where do we see this over here? Obviously, we see again, there's many commentaries which explain what is the chassid if that's the case. What is the Morei Torah? Does he have problems with his Yetzer Hara? What is the Nevi'im? Is again, we understand right away, he's someone who's close to HaKadosh Baruch Hashem, brings his word, and makes it manifest into the mind of the Navi. So let's say it's a separate category, which we see is like Moshe Rabbeinu or Shmuel and so on. But there's those who again discuss who is the chassid over here? How does he fall into place? Is the chassid somebody who also has to mizgaber al Yetzer Hara, or he's something a third definition, but which again is those who tap into this Tikkun Zohar, or again the Morei Torah, does he learn so much that he has no problems with the Yetzer Hara? Maybe he's a tzaddik. But again, this is dealt with. But namely, the Alter Rebbe is trying to bring a raya is from these two determined terms. One, Gebeirim HaMizgaberim Al Yitzram, and the Alter Rebbe said there's a different grade which is called tzaddikim, which right away tells you that the Gebeirim HaMizgaberim Al Yitzram, that's not the tzaddik. The tzaddik is a different category. He's not mizgaber on his Yetzer Hara. He doesn't strengthen himself and overcome Yetzer Hara. Why? Because he has no Yetzer Hara. On what level doesn't he have it? Doesn't he have a Yetzer Hara? And there's many levels. Alter Rebbe says there's tens of thousands of levels. Or he completely conquered his Yetzer Hara totally. He totally conquered Yetzer Hara, and to the extent he transformed his Yetzer Hara became a Yetzer Tov. Again, the foe, the enemy, became an ally, which if you want to deal with it, if you want to translate in practical terms, he never has a problem. He never has he's never challenged by his Yetzer Hara. Things which are opposite the Neitzah Hashem, he doesn't have a taiva to it, he doesn't have a desire to it, he doesn't have a lust to it, he doesn't have a drive to it, he doesn't pull his eyes away from this or his ears away from this. He can't stand it. As we learned the other day, we mentioned the other day, there's a pile of smelly dirt, excuse my blunt expression, in a certain corner. You don't have to tell nobody that could you just don't look at it or don't stay away from it, don't tamper with it, don't play with it. It's something which innately we stay away from it as a clean, healthy, normal person. The tzaddik, anything which is not aligned with Ratzon Hashem, he stays away from it worse than Alter Rebbe. It's an interesting expression. You can look yourself in the end of the 24th chapter. Alter Rebbe describes anything which is not Ratzon Hashem, it's worse than just stam dirt. So the tzaddik, to him, if it's not aligned with Ratzon Hashem, he's disgusted with it. So if you disgust it with something which is not aligned with Ratzon Hashem, any natural taiva, lust with the human being, stam a human being has, the tzaddik is disgusted with it. So at that point, you can't say Mizgaber al Yitzrei. He doesn't strengthen himself of Yitzhara. He has no Yitzhara. There's nothing turning it. There's nothing driving him in that direction. Quite on the contrary, he's disgusted with it. So where is his whole drive in elukus and godliness? So that's the tzaddik. You can never say the tzaddik is someone Giberim Mizgaber al Yitzra. So who is the Giber Mizgaber al Yitzra? Right? Anybody could just say who is the Giber Mizgaber al Yitzra? Naturally, it's not the tzaddik, it's clearly the Beinani. Because the Beinani has a Yetzer Hara, right? He's Mizgaber al Yetzer Hara. So that is the Beinani. So again, from this line, from this Tikkun Yizei, the Alter Rebbe is bringing a raya that there are different grades in Yidden, and one of them is Giberim Mizgaber al Yitzram, the other one Tzaddikim and the Fedish not together. So the Giberim Mizgaber al Yitzram is Avein of the Beinani. The Tzaddik is a special Aveda, it's Simchot Tzaddikim Hashem, their whole delight and joy. And elation is in godliness, and that again, how do they acquire that? It's not through their Aveda. It's not through their service. Because through Aveda we cannot reach that. And if we're realistic with ourselves, we're going to daven and learn very much and do all the good things for a day, a week, even a month, or every year. It doesn't mean that we don't have a drive to things which are physical, material, mundane, and things even inappropriate that we have to stay away from if we're only realistic with ourselves. So where is our Aveda? Our Aveda is that despite, yes, I learn, I daven, I do all the mitzvahs, and despite that, my Nefesh Bahamas is completely, fully intact, and nonetheless, I know that's who I am, and I'll still continue to overcome Yizgaber al Yitzhara, even though, again, the same Yitzhara is going to come back 5 minutes or 5 seconds later. And it could be a year, 2 years, 10 years, a few decades, because I belong to Giberim Mizgaber al Yitzhara. It's another idea, it's getting kibbul schar, it's kind of reward. Aveda matana is like a matana, similar to the matana which is given to a kohen. Have a great night.